Thanks for tuning in to As the Tire Turns podcast. Before we dive into this week's episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor, AME International. Tire professionals insist on AME. I'd also like to recognize the AACF. For over 65 years, the Automotive Aftermarket Charitable Foundation has stood by those in the automotive aftermarket industry and their families during life's toughest challenges. Since 1959, with the incredible support of industry partners, AACF has provided vital assistance to individuals and families facing financial hardship due to unforeseen circumstances, such as floods, earthquakes, storms, fires, catastrophic medical conditions, life-changing accidents, devastating fatalities, and more. AACF offers a straightforward application process and a quick turnaround time for those needing support during critical moments. Visit www.aftermarketcharity.org to access the application and learn more about how AACF can assist during times of need. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our automotive aftermarket family. Support AACF today. And now, As the Tire Turns.
Francis came up and introduced himself, and he said, I'm Francis Jordanisms from Garner, Iowa. I own IMT, and I'm going to buy your company, and you're going to move to Garner, Iowa, and start my crane division.
Yeah.
And I said, sir, I think you got the wrong guy. I said, I'm going to tell you right now, I have no education. I know nothing about marketing. I know nothing about sales. The only thing I do understand is how to change a tire.
Yeah.
He said, I think you'll work just fine.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the only thing that I could think about is to make it work, you'd have to build me a truck, like the old timers and I've always said. If we just had down pressure, a little more reach, body set up with pull-out drawers. Because my pull-out drawers was Coca-Cola cases in a framework.
Yeah.
And so Francis took that idea and did real well with it.
Yeah.
Real well. But I said, and I'd have to completely equip the truck with all the tools, and then I will go from tire dealer to tire dealer and demonstrate the truck and sell it. He said, I like the idea.
Yeah.
I said, okay. Well, I guess we got something to talk about.
Yeah.
I said, okay. Well, I guess we got something to talk about.
Yeah.
Long story short, I ended up in Garner, and the day I arrived, Francis had a truck sitting out front with a tire hanging on it. The truck he had at the show, he took it home and fixed it.
Yeah.
He said, would you like to operate it? And I said, I would. So I go out and I'm putting it through the paces, and I picked this tire up about 5-6 feet off the ground, and I pushed the control, and before it hit the ground, I stopped it. And of course, the truck rocked, And Francis said, are you trying to break my crane? I said, sir, in our world, the crane has to take that.
Yeah.
We have to make these cranes take some abuse.
Yeah.
We ended up taking that crane to Paul J. Getty mine out in Wyoming and do a demo about a week later. And we broke the truck off, we broke the crane off, changing the big tire.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't strong enough. So we backed up the pieces, we came back to Iowa, and we redesigned.
Yeah.
And then that's where we started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That then started a somewhat of an illustrious career, right, with IMT, and then also with Garner, Iowa, for you.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I remember visiting you at one point and standing in front of your door and looking to my left and looking to my right, and I'll have to see if I have that somewhere, but it was when, I don't know if it was with the cell phone or the regular camera, but you could do these panoramic. I think it was maybe one of the earlier cell phones.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of stood there and did this panoramic photo, and in one, standing in one spot with this one photo, you had Stellar, American Crane, and IMT, right? So not too bad for, I think it's still a one stoplight town.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And so kind of amazing that, if it was either Berwick, PA, or I guess for a little bit Spruce Pine, North Carolina as well, right? But Garner, Iowa, somewhat that is tire truck central.
Well, you know, there was another, while we was up there and talk about tools, is the 55-ton aluminum jack.
Yeah.
You know, I was going through the Owatonna tool,
OTC, yeah.
OTC, for a tour, and the guy was giving me a tour, and we was walking down the hall, and here was this big picture of looked like a redwood.
Yeah.
Had a big notch out of it, and it had 3 of these rams sitting in it. And I asked the guy, I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, that's a timber tipper."
Yeah.
I said, "What's a timber tipper?" He said, "Well, those are 55-ton aluminum rams that we redirect the timber.
Yeah.
One fall that way and one fall this way. We notch it out, put jacks in, and start pumping." I said, "Really?" I said, "Will that pick up 55-ton?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "If it'll pick up 55-ton of wood, will it pick up 55-ton of steel?"
Yeah.
He said, what are you getting at?" I said, "Buddy, that's a jack. That's
Yeah.
not a ram.
Yeah.
It's a jack."
Yeah.
And he looked at me and I said, "Can I take one of those home with me?" He said, "Sure." So I did. I go into Francis' office next morning and I hold that thing out straight like that.
Yeah.
I said, "You know what that is?" He said, "No."
Yeah.
"Looks like something, a hydraulic." I said, "That's $1 million in your pocket."
Yeah.
He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You go out and get me a base put on this and a high pressure shutoff valve and I'll sell you $1 million of them."
Yeah.
He said, "You're kidding." I said, "No, I'm not." And so I immediately put that on my demo trucks. And
You have just triggered some people with the jack versus ram. There's and occasionally that'll come up online where it's a spirited debate as to
I'm sure. Yeah.
jack. Then you're supposed to lift not support that. It's for lifting, right? But then not necessarily support. But anyway, so. You are correct. Everybody 55-ton jack and then 100-ton. Now as the vehicles have gotten bigger,
Exactly.
right? You'll see them. There's some with locking collars but not a tremendous amount of innovation on those. I mean, some of these tools, and it's funny. You mentioned the tire sling earlier. There's tons of technicians that. Because there's really not a whole lot of people going out and doing like you used to sell a truck, you were on the road, right? You would demonstrate, you would change tires, and now people have the trucks, but the tools themselves, a lot of people don't know, and they'll sometimes have a truck and say, "Yeah, I got a sling in there, but I don't know how to use it."
Exactly.
Or they tie it off and they don't anyway. So tire industry, of course, with the hands-on training that has become popular. People think the sling is like a new item because it's the first time they've seen it and used it.
Since 1960.
Yeah. We're talking 50 plus years.
Oh yeah. It's been out there. Yes.
Yeah. So not a whole lot of innovation, but the mini booster, the supercharger, certainly there's some innovation. There's been some other, right? Obviously some tools have changed, and I want to say it's a cat and mouse game, but the tires and the wheels get bigger and larger.
I think there's, not to interrupt, but I think there's one thing that would be an interesting point is my first trip with a tire truck in 1969, it'd be closer to 70 now, in the 70s, is Francis and I took the truck to Akron. We went around to all the rubber companies. It was all in Akron.
Yeah.
General, BF Goodrich, Firestone, Goodyear.
Yeah.
And we spent a couple of days entertaining and showing our truck. And then I took off on my first trip, and my first stop was in Pennsylvania at Walter's Tire. It was November the 3rd, in fact, 1969. It was snowing. I remember the day. And I pulled in, and there was a guy changing tires out in the back. And so I went in and introduced myself to the service manager, and Bill Stutzman was his name. And told him I was from Iowa. We're trying to figure out how to build tire trucks. I said, he said, "We don't have any need for tire trucks." Grumpy old guy, he talked from way down to the chest. And I said, "Well, sir, I see a guy out back changing tires." I said, "Would you mind if I'd go out and change a tire for him to show him what we have and to get his ideas on what we should do?" He said, "Son, if you're crazy enough to go out and work in that weather, go for it."
Yeah.
I said, "Thank you." And so I go out and I tapped the guy on the shoulder and I said, "Hey partner, can I change that next one for you?" And he said, "You bet." And so I did. I got all my tools out and I changing this tire. And right in the middle of it, this guy disappears. I thought, where'd he go? So I kept doing my thing. A little bit, I hear a horn honk, and I look up and look over the truck, and there was a guy sitting in a big old, another black Cadillac in my days, you know. But and he said, come here. So I went over and he said, son, would you pull that truck in that third bay over there? I want to look at it. I said, sure. So I go back and I'm finishing up and picking up my tools, and I asked this guy, I said, who's this guy? He said, that'd be the man. That's Mr. Walters. I said,
Okay.
oh, okay. So I got over and I got my truck installed and go in and I introduced myself to him. And he said, tell me about your truck. And so I did. I walked him around it and go back in his little office, and he said, now, you did a pretty good job telling me about that truck, but you didn't tell me anything about that air compressor. And I thought for a second, and I said, Mr. Walters, I told you everything I know about that air compressor.
Yeah.
That's not very much. And I said, I'll tell you, it's a 4-cylinder, 2-stage, got a 30-horse gas engine, and it'll make enough air to air your tires. He said, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
He said, how much is that truck? And I said, with tools, $19,500. $19,500.
Unbelievable.
He said, well, that seems like a fair price. He said, I'll take 4 of them.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. So we shook hands and we left, and I went to the first phone booth and I called Francis and I said, Francis, got an order for 4 trucks. He said, yeah, what else did you do?
Yeah.
He couldn't believe it. And I said, Francis, I got an order for
4 trucks. Yeah.
He wants this one and 3 more just like it. I said, you are kidding, aren't you? I said, nope. And so, and I told Mr. Walters because he wanted to keep it. And I said, sir, I have a 2-week trip planned and I'd like to continue this trip, but I will bring it back in 2 weeks at no charge to you.
Yeah.
He said, that's a deal.
How many trucks did you sell in those 2 weeks?
6 trucks.
Okay. Yeah.
First 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
That's how we got started.
Yeah.
But $19,500 for a truck.
Well, it's funny, you mentioned Mike Jordan earlier, who of course was my mentor at ESCO when I joined the industry, and then also Myers Tire Supply. So Mike had joined them in the 60s.
Sure.
And worked in national accounts, right? So of course being in Akron, right, like you said, all the rubber companies were there. But he eventually, to your point, tire service trucks were lucrative, and so he became a distributor for IMT and started selling and manufacturing his own trucks or assembling them. But for a while, he actually had service trucks in the Myers catalog, right? So, it's like, people say you can buy a house in the old Sears and Roebuck catalog, right? Well, Myers had a service truck, and he, when I first joined, he was flipping through some of these old catalogs, and you're like, that's a truck that they would sell in a catalog? But, to your point, it was new and revolutionary. So the good old days, as we say.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I'd mentioned Mobile Crane Inspection, MCI, another acronym for our industry. And basically, you are inspecting the cranes and doing some recertification and/or really training technicians. The pre-trip inspection is important in over-the-road trucking, but it should be on any CDL license. And so really inspecting a service truck is important as well, not just for the tires, but for what you're going to be using to lift, right?
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah, this all started out to certify the cranes.
Yeah.
Because in 2010, OSHA mandated that the cranes and tire hands on tire trucks, as well as other cranes, need to have an annual certification.
Okay.
Okay, so when I retired, I realized that dealers were not doing it.
Yeah.
So I contacted OSHA about it, and I said, I'm thinking about starting this business, but I'm not sure it's going to work because I don't ever see any inspections being checked. And the OSHA guy said, well, here's how it works. He said, we don't have enough manpower to check every crane out there. So the way we do it is if the crane's involved in an accident, we then check
Right.
And if they're not in compliance, then they pay the price.
Sure.
So that's when I told the industry, if you can guarantee you're not going to have any issues, you don't need to do this.
Right.
But if you do get caught, you're going to pay the price.
Yeah.
And so that's when I went ahead and started developing the process. And actually, I spent about 4 years working on the process and the procedures of doing inspections because it hadn't been done.
Yeah.
Now, you can take a truck and you can take the tire truck to a local truck equipment house and they will inspect it and put a sticker. But I felt we needed something different for the tire industry. I felt we needed to have an on-site inspection so the truck does not get out of service over a couple hours by appointment. And so that's what we developed. And then as we started the inspection process, I realized that, man, we need more than just the inspection. We need to do an annual physical on these trucks. We need to go through the compressors, the service bodies, the lift gates. We need to check the entire unit. So that's when we started developing our service units. So now today, we give a dealer a 14-page report.
Okay.
And it's all computerized, and this is where my grandson comes in. Jonathan, he developed this whole process.
Yeah.
Done an excellent job. And he just graduated from law school last couple weeks ago.
Okay, congratulations.
So he's doing real well. But the process seems to be working quite well because in some cases we almost rebuild the truck on the spot.
Yeah.
But we will carry, right now we're carrying in the neighborhood of $40,000 worth of tire, service truck repair parts on each of our service units.
Right.
And so this year we've also added oil cleaning, something totally new to our industry. Caterpillar's done it for years, but we've on board of each one of our units we have an oil cleaning system now where we will clean the hydraulic oil and or we'll change it, depends on the condition of the oil. But so we change the compressor oil, we change all the air filters, oil filters. So we're doing a complete service, on-site service of the service truck. Now, during the inspections, we try to get the operators to participate because we don't call it a training program because a lot of old OTR tire guys don't want to be trained.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we do it in a very, in a conversation type.
Sure.
Are you aware of this? You realize what this is, this type of thing. So what we try to do is to get them to better understand their service truck so they know how to adjust things. And the main thing is to understand when it's not working properly.
Yeah.
If nothing else, let your boss know so that you can do something, get it fixed before it becomes a major issue.
Yeah.
So it's working quite well. It's a service that they seem to really appreciate.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, so 15 years ago, you were enshrined in the Tire Industry Hall of Fame, right? So you got the 2009 Hall of Fame, and any gold jackets or rings with that? Or
Yeah, well, I can take this and a $5 bill and get a donut and a cup of coffee.
Well, listen,
But it's a great honor.
No, for sure it is, so you've mentioned a couple of icons, right? You know, Ed Wagner, and we'll even throw MJ in there, but Rick Pearson,
Brad Reagan,
absolutely,
Red Gaskins.
Marvin Bozarth, right? There's an OTR.
Absolutely.
When you said guy with a flat top, that was the first person I went to because I wore a flat top in my high school basketball days, and still wore it for a little bit afterwards, where people would wonder if I were military, right? You know, or something. But Marvin still sported a fantastic looking flat top. Late in his career and so on. But if you had an opportunity, right, to have lunch, and I guess I won't limit it to one person, with anybody from your past in the history, right? You know, tire industry, who, dead or alive, right? You know, who would you pick?
Oh my gosh, there's so many people that has meant so much to me.
Yeah.
And has taught me so much. You know, I have so much that I want to give back to the industry because the industry has done so much for me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you know, I always have to, when that comes to mind, is Brad Reagan.
Sure.
Brad Reagan used to come into the booth in Louisville every year. And he would come right over and shake hands. He'd say, son, are they taking good care of you?
Yeah.
I said, yes, sir, Mr. Reagan, they are.
Yeah.
He said, now I'm going to tell you something. If they don't, come see me here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but there is so many, and there's so many people that was in the tire changing world that
Sure.
I met, as well as the association people. But oh my goodness sakes, Mike Jordan would be one that Mike and I always had a great relationship. We had a good time.
Yeah.
And Mike would say, Carl
Chalmers?
Chalmers. Mike always say, Carl and I have clumbed some.
Yeah. He was an old lineman.
An old lineman, that's right. We
Yeah.
have clumbed some together.
Yeah.
That's a very true statement. So.
Well, it's funny. We still say him today, right? I worked with Mike up until the early 2000s or mid 2007, I guess, really. But I've stayed in touch with him, sometimes through the courts, sometimes.
Yeah, I understand how that works.
But more recently, right? We text and then like I said, I went and visited him just a few months ago. But people in my office will recognize things as we call them Jordanisms.
Jordanisms.
Right? Sayings, but some of them probably maybe should be repeated here. But he almost always attributes them to that Carl Chalmers, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, that's too funny. So never met the guy and
really?
So on, but I know the name, right? So yeah, okay. Well, that's perfect. That's a good stopping point for us. I sincerely appreciate, right? Hopefully, this is probably a little technical for some, right? but I'm at home just hearing some of the history, and you've obviously been a big part, and you didn't hold that 55 Ram out to me, but through Mike, and then of course starting AME with my partners in 2007, it's. The tire industry has been very good to me, and so I feel the exact same. We try and give back, and we really celebrate the tire technician. I think in one of my little research things, you said they were a tire buster. Back in the day, right? They've become a tire technician. So there's a few of us left that still get excited about the tools for changing tires, and certainly the training that Tia puts on. Is very helpful to show people not only the tools but the right way to use them.
Exactly.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, the only thing that we didn't touch base on was the tire hand.
Yeah.
The development of that. That goes back to the IMT days, of course, in the early 70s. And that had a little bit of a story to it. I went into the chief engineer at IMT. On a piece of notebook paper, I had sketched out a tire hand.
Yeah.
And I said, Larry, we need to develop a tool that we can hang on the end of these cranes to handle these big tires.
Yeah.
They're getting big, and they're getting too big for these guys to handle. And again, I was kind of shooting myself in the foot because I had developed the slings and the bar push units, and the tire hand was going to make that obsolete on the big trucks. And I probably spent 30 minutes explaining to him. I said, Larry, just think about it. If you went out to your car tire and you grab that tire, now to take it off, you need to be able to come out, you need to be able to turn it, flip it back and forth. We need to come up with something we can do that with tires. And after about 30 minutes, Larry looked at me and he said, Collins, you have got to be the craziest and SOB that I've ever known. He said, get out of my office. I got work to do.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So I went into Francis' office and I said, Francis, I said, I just got kicked out of your engineering department. He said, what'd you do? I said, well, I was trying to explain to Larry that we need to come up with something, and I went through the whole spiel. Francis said, come on with me. We went out to plant, and he got a hold of the plant manager, and he said, find me some tubes that'll slide in and out of each other. I'll find some cylinders, and we're going to make this gadget John's talking about.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, within 2 weeks, we had what we call a number 7 tire gun hanging on the end of a 7,000 crane. It had a manual crank to rotate the tire.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
It proved the concept.
And actually, that's what I took to the field. And the first few calls I made, people would say, what is that?
Yeah.
You know. And
That's
so,
funny.
long story short, we ended up with a tire hand.
Well, I'll ask one last question that not controversial at all. Maybe it is a little bit, but rear mounted versus what do you call it? Side mounted or cab mounted, or what do you call the traditional cranes?
Well, you got center mount cranes and you have side mount cranes.
Okay.
And I've got to tell you, the side mount crane brought a lot to the industry.
Yeah, and then how about, I know overseas a lot of times you'll see where they mount at the far end of and people who've had that love it.
Yeah, the Europeans do a real good job at that, and there's some real advantages because you can work off the back of the truck and get extra stability.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's the big thing, but you can work off the back of the truck and you can take the tire this way, you can take the tire this way.
Yeah.
When we work on the side of the truck, we're pretty much limited to what we can do.
Yeah.
But the Europeans has done a real good job with rear-mounted cranes, and we had built a few in the States.
Yeah.
And I always liked it because the big thing is stability. Now you've got the entire truck being your stabilizer.
Well, listen, I sincerely appreciate your time and appreciate the walk down memory lane. And that is it for another episode of As the Tire Turns. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to As the Tire Turns. Join us next week when we sit down with Ascot Vice President Mark Paquette.